you brought your account, which I just found very clear in terms of an explanation. I love this, the notion of the epistemological accountability, which I've never heard before. But by sharing your ideas now, like for example, I was feeling, as you were speaking, that you were expressing yourself with a real passion and energy, right? Now, if I looked at Jane as she was speaking, and I've talked to earlier part of the concept, I would say that actually Jane loves what she does. But when I was listening to the value of love as something that you would hold yourself accountable to, it wasn't mentioned. Now, and that's not said critically,
No.
It's just a curiosity I have about, again, the peer collaboration we're in at the moment, and whether Jane would think about bringing in the very passion that you were expressing, which came over to me in terms of an excitement for education as well, yeah? And whether that would also help Jane to bring almost a more adequate expression of the values that she's living, you know, with her students in response to Jean's question. Am I making sense there? That there's a deeper, I think, awareness of the values that you're embodying and expressing, which will come into your own sense of accountability.
I think so, Jack.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's very hard for me to express this sense of imperative that I feel on this. Whether it's just because I'm getting old, I don't know. But just that feeling that actually, having spent many years focused on the wrong kind of accountability, which when I reflect on my practice as a primary teacher, I don't know how far that accountability moved me forward in terms of enhancing learning, which is what I'm there to do. So for me, this has been a massive experience. I mean, in terms of impact, I could talk all morning about the impact on me as a learner and the impact on me as a teacher. Because for me, now in my practice, I have now got an opportunity to truly engage in learning with students, which, you know, I look back in some ways on my primary practice with regret that I didn't come to this when I was in my 20s, because I think I would have been a better primary teacher for that. And I would have looked at peer collaboration and understood why, as a learner, that was so important. So, you know, for me this has become extremely important, and as I work through my doctoral studies, I really want to tease out this idea of accountability. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, it's been fascinating, and particularly there's this concept of living contradiction.
Yes.
Because in some ways it seems to me that you, and maybe all teachers, certainly reflective practitioners, and I'm thinking of myself, who's been on a similar route to yourself through teaching, teacher education and beyond that. Whether in fact what you are saying is that you don't want to be a living contradiction, whether in fact you want that you are always, and teachers are always struggling to actually bring their values and their practice together in some way. The other sort of questions that are going through my head as well at the same time is that, yes, reflective practitioners forever wanting to improve their practice, but isn't it also the case that as practice changes, as the world of education changes, so do values change? My personal values might change because of what I've reflected about my learning and about the learners in particular and what actually engenders learning too. So I'm still struggling with this living contradiction because it almost seems a stability, and yet it isn't, because I don't think it's just the practice that changes personally for me when I look back at my life as a teacher and educator. I also think that my values change. Now, that is just a very hesitant sort of thought, but and I'm not sure, is that appropriate? Should teachers' values be changing? And I'm thinking this aloud now, and I'm thinking probably yes. As we know more about our learners, as we reflect more about the values that they hold as well, and that society holds, maybe both need to change. And there's a constant rubbing up against each other and moving on. Sorry, big ramble.
No, I think it's really interesting what you said there. I mean, for me, I think in the end, as a human being, right, I'm constantly going to be changing according to situations, and there is a tension around being a living contradiction, and there's not something you necessarily resolve. I mean, I am still teaching large groups, and I still have times when I walk out and think, actually, there was no real engagement, despite what I've put in place, the engagement. So I am living with being a living I mean, it's Jack's idea, this idea. You know, maybe Jack can come in on this a little bit. It's his idea about being a living contradiction. So I'm living with that. What I can only talk about is how I am trying to live with that idea of being a living contradiction, and how I'm, by looking at my values, by taking them out, exploring them, understanding them, and then relating them to the actions that I take, is how I can come to teach with some kind of integrity. You know, I can't do that for you. I wouldn't presume to do that for you. All I can do is do it for me and make it explicit in what I do.
Yeah, I think with the question, the person that I think you'd really enjoy, I learned a tremendous amount from her as I was supervising her doctorate, and that was Moira Laidlaw. And her thesis, it's on the web, and she got it in '96, and it was that question of yours that Moira faced in her thesis, and she taught me that my values were actually living. So I just thought up to that time I was just clarifying the meaning as they'd emerged in practice. What Moira showed me was that the values themselves were actually living and dynamic in the process of the change itself, and her thesis actually embraces that question, and as I say, I learned a tremendous amount about the values changing. So I'd let you have the URL for that if you like afterwards.
I think it's really interesting to read Jack's website and Jean's website, because they're full of living theory accounts of practice, which are really, really interesting to read. And certainly they resonated completely with me in my practice, and you know, they're very interesting. Is it actionresearch.net?
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then here on the subject of values, my school has just been doing a lot of work based on that. In services for sort of the past kind of year and a half, I've been spending some time as a staff, both teaching staff and support staff, because very often, as we all know in schools, it can be the teachers and then everybody else, and it's to try and pull everybody together with collegiality and stuff. And we've been doing a lot of work on values, and we filled out this matrix board thing on it. I don't know what the official term is. And then everybody was sort of working in groups to try and find out what the values were that came out of it. And the pupils, the guidance teachers worked with the pupils in their personal social educational classes, and they came up with what their values were. And there was questionnaires and everything put out to parents to try and pull them into it as well. And through it all, basically, everybody found that they had exactly the same values. And for looking at how the school should be going forward, and it was humour, excellence, research, because I'm here, humour, excellence, respect, and teamwork. And it's got like HE and then and RT. So it's like the heart of our school is based on these values. And it's just very much in its early process, but it's something that the school's looking to, and to develop more. And what our head teacher wants is for these values to basically be integral into everybody's everyday teaching. Because I think that those things sort of embody what should be happening in school. And no matter how much society changes, I don't think those particular things change. You know, you want every child to achieve their best, so their excellence. If their excellence is that they've got severe learning difficulties, and by the end of being in school they can write their name and count to 10, then that doesn't matter. What matters is that that's what they could achieve, and they've been given every opportunity to achieve it. And if their excellence is they can get to Oxford or Cambridge, and they've been able to give it every opportunity to achieve that, then that's fine. And it's just sort of bringing it together. And it was interesting that every section that make up a school community all came up with exactly the same